and 500 contract workers, you can still avail of, be outside the purview of Chapter 5B. And this is one of the biggest advantages. And that's why you've seen, the explosion of contract labor. The number of permanent labor has been reduced in many companies, and the work is outsourced, and you get a lot of people who are coming into the workplace who are basically engaged by the contractor working in the company to do jobs of a perennial nature. But certainly Chapter 5B ID Act has been responsible for the explosive growth of contract labor. Corona and contract labor. The first and second wave of Corona has shown how migrant labor and contract labor have become so integral to industry. Pictures of contract labor checking back to their homes in the absence of transport and the misery and miserly support given by employers and state governments to these unskilled and semi-skilled labor evoked a lot of public sympathy for them. The migrant and contract labor play a key role in industry was accentuated by the Corona crisis. The present labor laws have not been able to cushion their crisis. Why outsourcing? Getting the job done without adding to the manpower in the establishment, timely, viable and variable option of getting the job done outside or inside the organization. Low value, repetitive, boring and jobs such as repair and rework may be done better using an outsourced labor. Restructuring and VRS have led to many of the employees opting for VRS and accepting employment with service providers and moved on to their roles. Now, in many companies, this has happened. The company has had a VRS scheme, the employee has accepted the VRS, and then he goes and becomes an employee with a contractor. So this is also very, major change that is happening. And changing face of employment. In Maruti in 2012, the number of contract labor was only 60% and 40% were permanent labor. In Wistron 2020, contract labor was 400% compared to permanent workers. 8,500 contract workers to 1,350 permanent labor. The contract labor is the real and main workforce, and permanent workforce only a supplementary workforce. When supply of this labor is to 6 contractors, who is responsible for what is unknown. Further, who is creating trouble is also not clear. Now, a global perspective. India and China are the manufacturing hub for the United States of America and Europe. IT and IT industries, which are major beneficiaries, will go on a downturn. That's what is expected. With artificial intelligence and the type of changes that are coming in, they say that the growth that the IT industry experience will not be so much. Manufacturing will get a boost, and India is poised with this SEZ and Atmanirbhar Bharat to capture major market of the outsourced manufacturing. Employment is done through temporaries, contract labor. Employees on contract will increase. Service providers and international service providers like Quest Corporation, Randstad, Adico, these 3 were at Wistron, Bengaluru, where the violence took place and unprecedented proportion, 50 crores damage took place. There are others like Mafoy, TeamLease, Kelly, Frank Knight, Sodexo, who have been operating for long in the Indian environment, and the new order will see them prosper. Now, let me give you a little bit on the Contract Labor Act. It's an act for regulation and abolition of contract labor. This act is applicable to every establishment in which 20 or more. This is what is there in the original act, but now this has been changed to 50.
Yeah, hey, sorry to bother you, sir.
Yes.
Sir, are you scrolling this slide? Actually, we are not able to.
Yeah, I think there's a problem. So I'm scrolling, but you are not able to see the change. So can you then do the change?
Yes, sir. We'll just grab it from our side. Yeah.
You can share.
Yes, sir.
Slide number 7.
Thank you.
The definition of workman is very important to note, that he shall be deemed to be contract labor in the establishment if he is hired with a contractor with or without the knowledge of the principal employer. So this is something very important. Even if the person is being brought in without the knowledge of the principal employer, he is covered under the act. Contractor also includes the subcontractor. The next slide number 8. Workman. Now, this definition of workman I would like to bring to your attention does not include highly skilled workmen. It only includes those who do unskilled, semi-skilled, and skilled. It does not include highly skilled. So if at all you're having highly skilled employees, they are not defined by the definition of workman. And therefore the Contract Labor Act will not apply to them. So this is a very important understanding that you should have. Similarly, a person employed in managerial or administrative capacity or supervisory capacity drawing more than 500 rupees is outside the purview of that. Similarly, any contractor who is working outside the premises, on his own premises, is not counted as contract labor in this matter. Slide number 9, sir. Contract labor. Contract labor by and large is not borne on the payroll nor is paid directly. The contract workmen are hired, supervised and remunerated by the contractor, who in turn is remunerated by the establishment hiring the services of the contractor. Slide number 10, sir. Applicability. This act applies to the principal employer of an establishment and a contractor wherein 50 or more workmen are employed or was employed even for one day during the preceding 12 months as contract labor. In some states like Andhra it was 5 and in Gujarat it was 10, but now it has been enhanced to 50. For the purpose of calculating the number of contract labor employed for different purposes to different contractor has to be taken into consideration. This number will be for the company, the total number of contract labor engaged through different contractors. And if it is exceeding 50, then the company has to apply for registration. Then the act also does not apply to establishment. The work performed is of an intermittent nature, that is less than 4 months, 120 days, or is of a seasonal nature. For example, now monsoon is coming, so it is only during the monsoon work that will be there. Then it will not be deemed to be covered under the Contract Labor Act. Slide number 11, sir. So there is two things that we need to understand. The contractor needs to have a license if he is engaging 50 or more workers, and a company, if it is employing 50 or more workmen who are engaged through contractors, one or many, then it needs to be registered as a principal employer. The Act also provides for temporary registration in case contract labor is hired for a period of not more than 15 days. Next slide, please. Any change occurring in the particulars specified in the registration or licensing certificates needs to be informed by the concerned registering officer within 30 days. Now, generally, I have seen in many companies what happens is that, they don't take the license because the number of contract labor employed is less than 50. But over a period of time, the number of people engaged becomes more, and it crosses the limit of 50. There are 60 people, 70 people, and the contractor does not make the effort to go and re-register or register. If he is registered in the first place, he doesn't go to register. So suppose you have in your license provision where you have registered 100 workmen, but you are actually employing 200 workmen. That is misuse of the license. If you are registered for 100 and you are employing only 50, there is no violation. But if you are registered only for 50 workers and you have actually 100 workers in the premises engaged through the contractor, then it is a breach of the license. So any change that you want in the license needs to be obtained. Then principal employer has to apply for registration in the establishment. Another point is that the license issued for one contract cannot be used for entirely different contract work, even though there is no change in the establishment. Slide number 14. The Act enjoins joint and several responsibilities of the principal employer and contractor. Principal employer should ensure the contractor does the following: pays the wages as determined by the government, if any, pays the wages as fixed by the Commissioner of Labour, or contractor should make efforts to pay fair wages to the contract labor. It should be above the minimum wage, and it should be a fair wage, that will be ideal. Number 15. If the contractor is employing more than 100 workers, then he has to provide a canteen. If the work is likely to last for 6 months or more. Restroom, where the workman is required to halt during the night and the work is likely to last for 3 months or more. Then latrines and urinals, drinking water, washing aid, first aid, creche. Now, these are all things that are there in the Factories Act. The same provisions are there in the Contract Labor Act. Then in maintenance of registers and records, maintain various registers and records, display notices, abstracts of acts, issue employment card to his workmen. This is very important. every person who is working in the premises must have an employment card. Then registration of certain establishment, that is, if you've got more than 50 workers, you have to register as a principal employer. Effect of non-registration. Suppose, what happens if you don't register? Okay. If you register, one of the biggest advantages in the act is that if you have registered as a principal employer, any employee of the contractor cannot claim that he is employee of the principal employer. So it's like a kavach. It's a shield. Registration under the act gives the principal employer immunity from claims of employees of contractors saying that they are employees of the principal employer. Prima facie, the court will not accept it. You have to prove by evidence. Then the act also contains provisions, section 10(1) and section 10(2), for prohibition of employment of contract labor. And it also talks about the process of abolition of contract labor. Section 10(2), and this is what been emphasized by the SAIL, judgment. The Constitution bench said that the process for abolition of contract labor has to be followed strictly by the government, and these tests have to be fulfilled, whether it's of a perennial nature, whether it's ordinarily done through regular workmen, whether it's sufficient to employ a constable for the whole time. So these are all the important provisions that are there. And only then the government can take a decision which is an informed decision. It cannot be an arbitrary decision. Then registers and records. That also is very important. We discussed this briefly. Then important provisions of the Act, slide number 18. Grant of license to the contractor. If the contractor has got more than 50 employees, then he will get a license. But the Act also envisages unlicensed contractor. Now, only disadvantage that you will have if you engage an unlicensed contractor is his PF and his ESI contribution of the workers. If he doesn't have a code, then you have to contribute PF and ESI on behalf of those workers under your code. And you cannot have a situation where they are not covered under the PF and ESI Act. So that is a responsibility of the principal employer. Merely because you have put their names and contributed PF and ESI because the contractor did not have a code will not give them permanency in your establishment. They cannot claim that they are your employees. They are employees for the purpose of Contract Labor Act for coverage of insurance or for PF, but not for permanent employment. Welfare and health of the contract labor is the responsibility of the contractor, but if he doesn't fulfill it, then primarily it becomes a responsibility of the principal employer. Responsibility for payment of wages, section 21. This is the most important section provision of the Act, where one person of the company has to be designated who will see that every month the payment is made as mentioned in the wage register. That's a very important thing. And he certifies that he has seen the payment made. Now, if you do this, then the complaints of employees not being paid will never arise. So it becomes very important for the principal employer to see that the contractor really pays his worker on the date of payment of wages. Lifting the wheel in contract labor, is the contractor a named lender? So this is one of the very important tests prescribed by the Supreme Court, and which I think in many of the case laws has become very common. And what is that? That whether the contract is a genuine contract or it's a sham contract. And in a sham contract, the test of supervision and control is critical. Who gives orders to the workers? Who monitors them? Who supervises them? Now there is something called as primary supervision and secondary supervision. Primary supervision is done by the contractor and the person concerned are working under him. Now, some things may be countersigned by the principal employer. Now, that is called secondary supervision. For example, a person has worked overtime and he has worked for so much hours. Now, that may be certified also by the person of the company. Merely because he has signed some document where he has testified, it is not considered to be supervision of the employer. It is called secondary supervision, where he is authenticating the actual work done and the comments made by the contractor or the supervisor of the contractor. So this is the model that has come in. If you see, contractor has less than 50 employees and employee. This is the next slide, slide number 19. I hope you're on the slide. Contractor has less than 50 employee and employer engages less than 50 employees, you come into the first quadrant. No need for registration under the Act. So to a very great extent, small companies which have less than 50 employees, working through contract labor, don't have any problems relating to the obligations of the Act. Then employer engages more than 50 contract employees. Then your contractor has less than 50 employees. Employer needs registration. Contractor can be unlicensed. Then we come to the next quadrant. Contractor has more than 50 employees, and employer engages less than 50 contract employees. Now, for example, you may have a security contractor who's got 100, 2000, like some of the agencies that are there, 4-7, they will have some 2000 or 3000 contract labor. But the persons who are deputed to your organization will be only 5 or 6. So contractor may have more than 50 employees. The employer engages less than 50 contract employees. Then employer need not register because number of contract employees working is less than 50. But contractor has got more than 50 employees on his roll, then he needs a license. Then of course the last quadrant we come in, which says contractor has more than 50 employees and employer engages more than 50 contract employees, then employer needs registration and contractor needs license. Then we come to slide number 20. Accidents to contract labor. If any contract labor who's working in the premises of the principal employer meets with an accident, whose responsibility is it? It is the responsibility of the contractor. He has to pay the damages. But suppose contractor doesn't pay, then principal employer can pay and then he is indemnified by the contractor. Act provides you can recover the amount paid from whatever dues that are pending with the contractor. Then you have prohibition of contract labor, slide number 21. This is what the government section 10.1, 10.2, which is the basis whether the process, operation or work is incidental to or necessary for the industry, business, manufacture or occupation that is carried on, whether it's of perennial nature, whether it's ordinarily done through regular workman, whether it's sufficient enough to employ whole-time workman. Prohibition of employment of contract labor, the next slide, 25. The power to abolish contract labor is available even in the establishment to which the Act does not apply. Then what are the offences under the Act and what is the punishment for the same? So there are some very simple things that are prescribed in the Act which are basically common sense and logic oriented. If you obstruct an inspector who is coming inside, then you can be punished. Refusal for inspection or inquiry, you can be punished. If you refuse to produce a register and documents, you give some time for that. It cannot be immediately demanded and you have to produce everything. You can take time. 1 week's time is considered to be reasonable time. Produce all the registers and documents. Preventing any person from examination before the inspector. If you're preventing any person from deposing, he is asking questions and you are telling not to answer those questions, then you are liable for prosecution. Punishable with imprisonment for 3 months or fine of ₹500 or both. Now, many of these laws, in India seem to be a little onerous because it involves imprisonment terms. And companies don't like their executives getting to the prison for some minor violation. Without registration and without license, if you're operating the establishment without the license or without registration, then punishable with imprisonment of 3 months or a fine up to ₹1,000 or both. The Act does not provide for permanency of the employment of contract labor, and therefore a succeeding contractor is not obliged to absorb the contract employees of the previous contract. So this is a very important provision that you must know. Suppose you terminate the contractor, he goes, his employee also goes. But suppose a succeeding contractor comes and employs them, there is no obligation for him to absorb. But if he takes them, fine, it is a new employment. Then appropriate government has power to exempt any establishment or any class of contractor from application of the said provisions. Then what are the circumstances under which registration that has been granted to an establishment can be revoked? One is on misrepresentation. If suppose the application that you have made is, you're given, you need 50 workers and actually you're taken saying that 50 workers are there and actually he comes and says that actually 500 workers are there. So there's a misrepresentation or suppression of any material fact. Or you're not fulfilled the requirements in the register. Then some of the checklists for principal employees, filing of annual returns. Now this is very important. If you engage contract labor, every year you're required to send a return. Supervising the responsibility of contractor to avoid enjoining of the liability. So you have to pay the wages, see that he is paying the wages, see that he pays the overtime at double the rate, see that he's adhering to the law, he has got the register, he has given leave to the people concerned. All these facilities you must ensure. Ensure that the facilities of canteen, drinking water, washing, restroom, latrines, urinals, estate, fresh are provided by the contractor. Now, in many companies, the company's own facilities are allowed, to be mirrored by the contractor's employees. So many of the companies, good companies, give the same facilities which are given to the permanent worker also to the contract labor. For the contractor, what is the checklist? He must see the licensing, whether he is required to obtain a license and renewal of the license. And now, the code of, occupational health and safety and working conditions. The renewal of license is permitted for 5 years. So some very major changes are in for the engagement of contract labor. Then maintenance and preservation of register of persons employed, muster roll, register of wages, register of fines, register of reductions, display of notice rate for wages, hours of work, wage period, and most importantly, name and address of the inspector having jurisdiction. So this is an ego issue. You have everything, but you have not mentioned the name of the inspector who is there. He will take it amiss and he will find ways to prosecute you because you didn't put his name on the notice book. So it becomes an ego issue. Provide facilities for canteen, drinking water, washing, restroom, latrines and urinals, first aid and creche. Employment card, service certificate, and half-year period. So these are some of the requirements of the contract. The next slide. Slide number 30. Following registers to be maintained: muster roll, register of wages, register of deductions, register of overtime, register of fines, wage slip, register of advance in the form of Form 12 under Contract Labor Act, register of persons employed under Form 13. Then wages to be disbursed. Next slide. Wages to be disbursed in the presence of authorized representative of the principal employer and is required to record under his signature a certificate at the end of entries in the register of wages. So this is very important. Many companies don't pay heed to this. This is very crucial. If you're doing this, you have fulfilled 50% of the obligation of the Act. Then slide number 32. Now we come to the precautions that have to be taken. Generally, you can have unlicensed contractor, but because they don't have PF and ESI coverage, it becomes a responsibility of the principal employer. So having a licensed contractor is advantageous to having an unlicensed contractor. Licensed contractor may be a little more costly, but he brings in certain advantages for compliance perspective. So you could consider this, that the cost of compliance is taken care of if you have licensed contractor. If you don't have a licensed contractor, you have to undertake the compliances, which ordinarily the contractor would do. If you have similar contracts and rotate his workman between companies, it would be ideal. So suppose he is working in Sandoz. If he can move some of his people to Novartis or Sun Pharmaceutical or Alembic Pharmaceutical, business is the same. Work will be something which is very familiar to them because they are working in the pharma industry. So if you have a contractor who has got several contracts with number of pharma companies and is able to move his employees between different companies, they know the job. They have seen pharma companies. They know what is a good manufacturing practice. So then it becomes easier to deploy such people. So having a contractor who is good and who can rotate people concerned between different companies would be ideal. The actual recruitment of workmen, their supervision and instructions have to be given by the contractor and not the principal employer. Appointment on contractor's letterhead. Then it is also preferred that the tools and equipment should be owned by the worker or the contractor and should not be ordinarily of the principal employer. Employer must also be registered as a principal employer. Advantages to change the contractor and his workman periodically, say once in 2 or 3 years, so that no contract workman can claim right to permanency. It's also good to change the contractor periodically. It should be applied religiously to watch and ward. See, now there are some functions like security. Security should not know the people concerned. Otherwise, they will allow people to go and all that based on their knowledge. and somebody is taking some item from the company, without knowledge of the security fellow. So familiarity, reduces security capabilities. So that is always required to be changed. So once in 2 years, you should change the security. Then even similarly, the gardening and housekeeping contracts, you should change. There's nothing so great about this, doesn't require any great skills for this. You can easily get this done. Similarly, canteen. Canteen, of course, it's sensitive. So you must have people, who have got this good capability of running canteens and handling problems. Because, the canteen is considered to be one of the critical areas for companies. So you have to have a good canteen contract. If an employer does not work in the establishment for more than 240 days, the company is safe. But here, this 240 days is actually a myth. Because in Contract Labor Act, a license is given for 1 year. And if the license is renewed, you can engage him for 2 years or 3 years also. There's no problem. But just some companies are, very touchy about this, particularly multinationals. They don't want people working for more than 240 days. People have asked my opinion, is it valid to take them for more than 240 days? Answer is yes. Because they're, this is pursuant to a license given by a Commissioner of Labor. So your doing that is not wrong. Next slide. Then obligation to the principal employer. Whoever is coming to work in as a contractor, his name must be on the register and you must have a contract signed with them. That's very important. These are two very important things that you need to ensure and comply with in the Contract Labor Act. What is that? The contractor who is coming in, his name must be there on the contractors list. And two, he has a valid and subsisting contract with the employer. I've seen in many companies, the contractor's agreement is there, but it is not signed. Both the parties are not signed. That is not valid at all. Or it is signed and it is expired. That is not valid. It has not been renewed. You ask them, no, sir, ho jayega abhi. Corporate ke paas hai. And these things will not work. You have to have your contracts ready, authorized, valid contracts. It must be current and it must be proper. It must be signed by the persons concerned. Ensure that employees of contractor are paid wages on time, more than the minimum wage, if not the minimum wage. Has PF and ESI coverage and register of contractors as per the requirements. Ensure you send returns and contractor also sends the return. Display relevant notices. Ensure that issues or problems brought to your notice are attended to promptly by the contractor. That's very important. Do not ignore these issues or problems or keep management posted proactively. And then some precautions that are required to be taken. If it is prohibited, like for example, Maharashtra watch and ward, this Mathadis do the loading and unloading, so you cannot engage people unless they're on your roads. Then licensed contractors prefer to unlicense. Ideally, do not examine the same workman for more than 240 days. Now, this 240 days, let me again mention, it is not mandatory. It is just a precaution companies are observing. You can very well keep as long as you got the license for more than 240 days, that is 1 year. Engage a contractor who can rotate employees between different firms. Then, where contract employees working for more than 240 days, you ensure that they get more than the minimum wage. And if you've got a union, it is good to sign a union settlement also on their behalf and giving them fair wages that will be appropriate and it will insulate your company from troubles. Contractors want a margin in addition to meeting all the labor costs and risk of engaging employees. In the long run, contract employees can become very costly if the direct and indirect costs are added by the employer. Employer pays service tax. Now, of course, the service tax is gone. It has become GST. The contractor has tax deducted at source and he adds up for the PF, bonus and gratuity. The markups will also make the cost of contract labor also very high. So it's actually a myth saying that contract labor is cheap. It is not so. Precaution of the principal employer. I will conclude another 5 minutes. The contractor has to do the monitoring and control. Do not give direct or written instructions to the contract labor. Let the contractor do it. Speak to him and get it done rather than doing it directly. Danger of email IDs. Please ensure that you don't send any mail directly to any of the employee concerned. If sitting on the panel to select contractors employee, do not give written commitments or written comments on suitability or selection. You can be present. You can say, yeah, this person appears to be okay. You can select him. But you should not put your records in writing. Then do not make any payments directly to the contract workman. Even advances like financial assistance, like loans, to be done by the contractor and not directly. Now, in COVID and all that, many companies are giving money directly to the contractor's employees. It's very dangerous. Tomorrow he will claim that, you have given this because I am employee of your company. So there is no nexus why you should give money to me. Contractor can raise an invoice. Contractor can give, he can raise an invoice and you can pay that. That is fully tax free. But you paying directly to the contractor's employee is not tax free. It is not tax free. He is not your employee. How can you pay him? It will be disallowed as an expense if the income tax holder comes to know about it. Tools and equipment generally to be provided by the contractor only and not by the company. Then leave application should be signed by any officer, should not be signed by any officer of the company. Performance appraisal should be done by the contractor and not by any official of the principal employer. Any such document will only lead to assumption that the contract is a sham contract. Have a separate establishment and registers for allowing any contract workers into the establishment. Nobody should get in without giving the name of the contractor and his name. Now, of course, many companies also have Aadhaar cards also, which is taken, without which no person is allowed inside. The companies where hundreds of contractors work, when a contractor's workman gets injured or dies, it becomes very difficult to trace the contractor to which the worker belonged to and who will be liable. Now, as I told you, Wistron, they were having as many as 9,000 contract labor. Now, this is about the Wistron violence. So, I have given great details of this. There are three items that were there. One is the employee was not paid the overtime. They did work for 12 hours, but they were paid only for 12 hours. They were not paid for they have to be paid for 18 hours. So that they didn't pay. Then 2 days wages was not paid because they said this was a software glitch. And more importantly, the persons concerned, they were shown, that this is the money that will be paid to as cost to the company. Now, cost to the company is different from, the total salary, what we call take-home pay. So, and I think they had also reduced that because of COVID. Whatever they were paying, they had reduced that, and that created a situation of violence. So, you can go through this. I'm not covering it because there's a shortage of time. And some of these companies, the shares of these companies are quoting, TeamLease share is 3,141. That is what the price of the shares is, 10 rupees share. Then there are new sins, like for example, which I call new sins and old sins, in the engagement of contract labor, hire and fire policy. It is increasing insecurity in the mind of contract labor. Contract labor numbers are running into huge, not hundreds, but thousands. Any injustice or unfair treatment meted to the contract labor multiplies, and resentment, and there is an overreaction often to small errors of judgment or mistakes in dealing with employees. And terminating contract labor, the whiff of unionization or attitude problems such as asking for statement of wages or identity card, appointment letter, etc., which is within the law. One contract labor asked for an appointment letter, and then the HR head said that, such a fellow we don't want, troublesome fellow, remove him from next day morning, he should not be coming. He was a fellow who was very well connected with the political establishment and also with the police. And it created such a lot of problems for the company. What he was asking was required under the law. You are required to give an appointment letter. But then, you overreact and create a situation where it leads to violence, and then unionization takes place of the contract labor. And today, unions are, having reduction in numbers. So they would be very happy to always encompass and engage, the contract workers. Many contractors now managing contract labor are not familiar and having similar approach, creating huge resentment among those with lesser facilities and privileges. And hands-off approach of the management. Contract labor problems are contractors' problems and company has no role to play. Often contractors run away at the first sign of trouble. Company is required to substitute in case of deaths due to accident in the workplace, and no poor or proper training given, to the employees of the contract. And giving huge increases in wages to regular workers, but not the contract labor, and that's something which is a very serious sin. And there are common sins, engaging contract labor 1/3 the cost of permanent workers, and getting 3 times the output from them compared to what permanent workers do. So this is again a very major, shift which people see as injustice. They get so much money and they don't do work, and we get less work and we do so much work. So that feeling of oppression is very much there in the contract. Paying the minimum wages despite several years of service with no regard to the quality of service provided. So a newcomer and the old timer, he's worked for 3-4 years. He also gets the same wage. This will also get the same wage. It creates a lot of resentment among themselves, and that impacts the organization. Then making them work for 12-hour shifts and paying them wages which are single overtime rate and not double as demanded under the law. Not considering for position in the company and recruiting workers who do not have the same productivity or performance of the contract labor, and they see a person paid more but doing less work in the organization. The injustice becomes apparent to all on the shop floor, including permanent workers of the company. not verifying the amount to be paid to the contract worker against the bill that was submitted. Now, this is the biggest sin that I think many companies pay. They pay for gratuity, they pay for bonus, and contractor doesn't pay the worker anything, including for the overtime that he has been paid. So please monitor whatever payment you are paying, is the contractor making the payment to the worker concerned? And if he's cheating you, don't allow be cheated so easily. Not providing similar facilities to regular workmen like common canteen, restroom, and this can be very serious, that, you go and see the workers or the regular worker are given very nice food. Then the dal is diluted for the contract labor. All these can create very serious problems. Then not changing contractors and allowing them to continue with the same set of workers for several years, making employees claim for permanency in jobs very strong. Now, there are some very important judgments of the Supreme Court, in this matter. Contract labor matters have gone right up to the Supreme Court. So favorable judgments are what I call Steel Authority of India. It's a very important judgment. I'll just touch briefly. So another 5 slides only, so I will not take too much time. Points addressed in the judgment are: what is the true and correct interpretation of what is appropriate government? Whether state government has authority to prohibit contract labor in respect of an industry which is governed by the central government. Whether automatic absorption of the contract labor happens on account of prohibition of contract labor. The answer is no. The employees who are working as contract labor will get terminated if it is abolished, and they will not get automatically onto the rolls of the permanent workers. So this is a Supreme Court judgment. It's a 5-bench judgment, which is called the Constitutional Bench judgment. Then similarly, the workers engaged through a contract labor cannot file a case against the principal employer. They are not working. Then Supreme Court in BHEL versus Mahindra Prasad. This is also a very important judgment which came in 2019 only, very recent. And it examines what exactly is a sham contract. And the deciding factors are who appointed the workman, who pays the salary, who has authority to dismiss, who can take disciplinary action, continuity of service, extent of supervision. Held there was no appointment letter, EPF not covered by principal employer, no wage slip from the principal employer, no wages paid by the principal employer. Hence, there was no termination by the principal employer. Order of the Labour Court and the contract was sham, and workers entitled to reinstatement without back wages, and High Court confirmation of the same was quashed, ruling that contract workmen not entitled to any relief from principal employer. And even again, Pawan Sons, this also was a very good judgment in favor of the company and not the contract labor. Companies' PF should be extended to cover contract labor appointed directly by Pawan Hans and not to the contract. Paid directly by Pawan Hans. 250 such employees to be included in Pawan Hans PF scheme, which also provides for contract labor PF contributions. PF authorities directed the company to extend PF coverage to contract and casual laborers. RPF submitted that as the company remained outside the purview of EPF, direction to deposit contribution from date of eligibility of the contractual employees till the date of remittance was not workable and could not be sustained. Interest of justice will be best served if the benefit of PF is provided to members of the respondent union and other similar situated contractual employees from January 2017 when the writ was filed before the High Court. RPFC is directed to examine, to determine and compute the amount to be deposited by the company on the one hand, and the members of the respondent union and others similar situated on the other hand. The computation will be required to be made for the period January 17 to December 19. Company liable to pay simple interest, and employees also would have to pay their matching contributions. And with this, let me conclude. I would like to thank Bhaskar Joshi and the Tirupati Placement Agency and also Anand Institute for taking the trouble to organize this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for a very enriching presentation. Thank you once again. Dear participants, we also have amongst us Dr. Neeja Sharma, madam, and it is my privilege to introduce her. She is a Chief HR Officer at KHS Machinery Private Limited since 2018. She has also worked with Tata Motor Finance, Eramat, CMC Limited, BMA, to name a few. Without taking much of your time, I invite Dr. Nirja Sharma, madam, for her concluding remarks. Over to you, madam.
Good evening, everybody. It's such a pleasure to join you all this afternoon. It's been nice to hear an erudite and knowledgeable speaker like Mr. Krishnamurthy. The entire walkthrough that he did of the contract labor scenario, right from the rules, regulations, the do's and don'ts, the important provisions, the case studies, the judgments that he talked about. Very, very informative, Mr. Krishnamurthy. I'm sure our participants have a whole lot of questions for you, and I think we should give some time for you to answer those questions. So let me, because Mr. Joshi had requested that I touch upon some of the practices that we do here at KHS. So I'll just give a quick summary so that it can come back to you for taking on the questions that must have come on the chat. So a couple of myths which Mr. Krishnamurthy also touched upon. First one was that, this contract labor is more prevalent and more existing because it is actually less expensive or cost lesser than regular labor, which is not true. Mr. Krishnamurthy also touched upon the fact that with the GST there and with the percentage that is paid to the labor contractor, actually the contract labor turns out to be much more higher, at least 12 to 15% higher than regular manpower, because as per the act, if you pay them all the dues and all the salaries, they do not cost any lesser. So that myth should be taken out from our minds that they cost lesser. The second myth is around that, we do contract labor only in very low-end kind of activities, whether it is garden or housekeeping or transportation, repetitive works, low value add. Over the years, we've seen that this is really not true. We have growing evidence of contract labor in very high productivity, very high modern jobs also. For instance, when Bharti outsourced the entire telecom network to IBM, they proved that it was not the core activity, but the kind of work which was being done was very high-end work. So we do have contract labor doing very high-end work also. So that myth that they're only in non-core, low-value activities is not true. And another very interesting thing, like after the mid-2000 era of economic boom, we expected that contract labor in the industry would go down lesser. But if you actually look at the NSSO employment surveys and all, and this is a point Mr. Krishnamurthy also talked about, that we see there is a lot of reliance on the use of contract labor. Different industries, different reasons, but contract labor is here to stay. And because it is here to stay, it is in the best interest of the employer as the principal employer to make sure that they're taken care of. And in this context, I would briefly touch upon what we do here in KHS to take care of our contract laborers. So it all starts from when we are hiring them. We hire them through a contractor, obviously not directly, but our brief to the contractor is look at their attitude, see if they are sincere and they have the learning ability. Second thing is see if they're coming in through a referral, because people who come in through referrals, we find that they know the kind of people which would fit in our work environment and it works easier rather than paying an unknown person. And another very important thing is that we always tell them to go in for the economically needy person if given a choice, somebody who really needs the job, because then they value the kind of employment that they get at the workplace. So right from this time when we hire them and with these norms, and then once they are with us, a few things that we take care of is that we ensure that they get fair treatment. We treat them at par in terms of facilities, same canteen, same uniform, similar gifts during festivals, absolutely fair treatment, no difference in the food being served to them. Most importantly, we make them feel very valued and respected. And I think that's the point which many of our contract labor, when you talk to them and why they single out a company to say is that I feel valued in this organization. Then we make sure that whatever contribution they are doing for us is appreciated at various times. It could be either for Kaizen or for suggestion scheme or for production, or even their contribution in different sports and cultural activities that we do. So make sure that their contribution is regularly appreciated. Another important feature is that we have a mechanism for immediate conflict resolution. We do not wait for conflicts to simmer. Anything happened here and now on the shop floor, attended by the first managers, the first responders, if not the HR department, if not the HR department. So conflicts are not allowed to fester at all. And very importantly, we maintain excellent interpersonal relations with them, even to the extent of if one of my contract labor is not well or if somebody is hospitalized, we senior management team, like we do for our regular employees, we make sure that we have this relationship with the contract labor and also his families. So a few of these things have really helped us make sure that the contract labor with KHS is been working very well, and we've not had a single day of production, touch wood, lost due to any labor issues in the last 20 years that the company has been working. That's from my side.
Thank you, madam. Dear participants, now the forum is open for question answer. Kindly post your questions in the chat box. We will take the questions one by one. Sir and madam, I can see a few questions in the chat box. Question is asked by Mr. Raj. What will be the liability of principal employer in case contractor refuses or does not bear expense of injury to contract workmen?
Can I answer that?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah, the liabilities of the contractor, if he doesn't meet it, then you have to make the payment and then it can be recovered from the contractor.
Mr. Raj, hope sir has answered your question. Next question is from Ms. Charmi. During the Tauktae cyclone, recently the Afghan's contract laborers on ONGC offshore asset were warned, yet the contractor took them to work. Many of them died also. So what are the implications of this as per the Contract Labor Act? Sir?
Yeah. First and foremost, the very important thing that is there is that, if these employees are covered under ESI Act covers the liability of death, and the family also will get what is called as dependents benefit. So they will give to 2 children and also the wife of the person for the life of the person concerned, and so they will get PF as well as from ESI corporation compensation if they have been covered. Now problem comes if they are not covered employees. So sometimes ESI is not applicable now. For example, offshore they will not have ESI coverage. Offshore is something which will be only by special insurance policy that you have to take, and by law they are compelled to have insurance coverage for any person who is working in the seas on the ships. So they were working on the barge, then they will be covered by insurance. So they will get that compensation from the insurance company. The contractor will see to that. So generally in high risk jobs, insurance is a must. So they get covered in case of death.
Okay, sir. One more question from Mr. Raj. What are the non-perennial activities? Do contract worker and outsourcing agencies worker are same? And what will be ideal percentage for permanent workmen and contract workmen?
Now, what is perennial job? What is intermittent job is defined in the Act. Anything less than 120 days is, intermittent. So you can engage, you don't have to register under the Contract Labor Act. For job more than 120 days, definitely, you are requiring to have a license and all that, and the requirements are there under the Contract Labor Act. What is perennial activity? Any activity which is more than 240 days can be said to be of, work of a regular nature, and which is there, and if it's every year in that company for more than 240 days, that the person is required to be there, then the company can engage somebody for that job, and that can be deemed to be a job of perennial nature. So that is the aspect of perennial nature. Then what is the second question that you had asked? There was a second question also in the same question. Can you please repeat that?
Yes, sir. So what will be the ideal person for permanent workmen and
Yeah.
contract workmen?
Now, ideal number of persons, which is there. See, Maruti, when they had that violence in 2012, they had, 60% contract labor. Generally they say, you should have only 20 or 30% of contract labor and remaining work should be done by permanent labor. Now that is gone. Now, I had gone to an automobile company in Ranjangaon, and the number of people who were working as contract labor was 10 times. 3,000 people were working as contract labor, and permanent workers were only 300. So 1/10. So this is similarly, same thing happened in, Bangalore, Westron, where the number of permanent workers was only 1,200. The number of contract labor was 9,000 persons. So, the ratios, there is no such, I've done a study on this contract labor engaged in different companies. There is no such thing as a fixed ratio for all industries. It is industry specific. It depends on the type of nature of industry and what is the common practice in that industry. So in cement industry, there's a lot of contract labor engaged. They're not on the permanent rolls of the company at all. They're only paid minimum wages. So it depends on the nature of the industry. There's no such thumb rule that can be applicable everywhere. But contract labor is preferred to regular labor because, you can engage as many number of contract labor you want. There's no problem. But if you engage permanent labor, it becomes very difficult to get rid of them. So if there's a downturn or there's a business that is slack, you can't terminate. Contractor has got the capability to terminate. And the contract generally is not to one contractor, it is to many contractors. So it's always easy to let go of a few contractors and their workers, and it doesn't create problems. But, you let go of your permanent workers, it creates a lot of problems.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So next question is from Mr. Daina Jagtap. It is also related to direct fixed term contract employment in NGO sector. What if the contract extends 24 months? Should that employee be taken as permanent?
Yeah. Now, fixed term employment is different from contract employment. Okay. What is the biggest advantage in fixed term employment? That it is for the fixed term. And then there's no GST payable on such employees. You're paying him salary, so that entire amount is allowable as an expense, and there's no additional cost. But the only thing is that, you have to pay him the same rate of wages, which you pay to your permanent workers, unless, you have lower wages for newcomers. Now, if you see some companies like Mahindra and Mahindra, Bosch, they have a clause. Now, the permanent worker in Bosch will get somewhere around 60,000 rupees in Bengaluru. Okay. But new entrant, they have got in their agreement with the union that the new entrant will be paid only 30,000 rupees. So if you see the Bangalore, minimum wages act, it is only 12,000 rupees. As against 12,000, they are getting 30,000. That is very fair. They are not giving him money as the permanent worker, company benefits. The contract labor benefit, because, he gets a job as a contract labor in that company, which are such a high salary. No contractor generally will pay more than 12,000 or 15,000. Generally, they pay only the minimum wages. They will not pay more than the minimum wages. So many companies now, they provide for agreements to pay a slightly higher amount than the minimum wage to the contract labor, and that's a good practice. But the advantage of a fixed term employee is that, he's not going to work for a very long period. He's going to work for either a period of 1 year, 18 months, 24 months, and no retrenchment compensation is required to be paid. But he is to be paid gratuity. If he's working for more than 240 days, you have to pay also gratuity. He will get bonus also. But advantage is that his services can be terminated without any problem. He will not get a permanent job in the company because he's working as a fixed term employee. So that is one of the biggest advantages of fixed term employees. But companies will still prefer to take contract labor only because, contract labor is still paid only the minimum wages. Fixed term employees have to pay the regular wages of the regular employees. It's a higher cost. But the advantage of fixed term employees is that you don't have to pay GST, and that is 18%. So that's so as Nirja was saying, that contract labor is not cheap. It is coming at a cost.
Thank you, sir. Next question is from Mr. Anantram Iyer. If contractor fails to pay his employees and principal employer had paid on behalf of contractor to the contract worker, if contractor is declared insolvent, how we can recover the money?
It's very difficult. You have to write it off. You are doing a business. You are not going to be able to pursue people who are not going to pay. So it's a risk and it's a write-off. So when you're engaging contract labor, this is also a risk. You're doing business. So you do business with people who are solvent. So you must have some bank guarantees. So don't engage any Tom, Dick, and Harry as a contractor. So there are some very basic requirements. So you do a proper audit before you appoint a contractor. Don't do appointment of a contractor who is just coming to the business to make money. So he can shortchange the workers. And this is what happens in many companies. They don't pay the contract labor for 3 months and 4 months. And you don't even know about it. Though the law says every month you have to have a supervisor who is there, who sees the actual amount paid, and you don't do it. So 2-3 months he is not paid means a very cardinal sin, which is a violation of the Contract Labor Act. But once you have done that, then that problem is sorted out. If you are having some good compliance requirements, fulfilled, then that's something which helps you a lot.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Next question is from Jitendra Singh Dodia. What's about gratuity if contract workers work more than 5 years in company? Companies don't want to give gratuity, so who is liable for gratuity, company or the contractor?
See, company is only liable for wages. Company is not liable for bonus or gratuity. So contractor has to pay gratuity for the employee concerned, and that employee can have a claim and dispute against the contractor for not paying him the wages. That claim cannot be with the principal employer. And in fact, in the coming code, on occupational safety, health and working conditions, one of the basic features of this Contract Labor Act is one person who is appointed by the contractor and given a letter of appointment, he will not be deemed to be contract labor. So this problem itself will be nipped in the bud once the new code comes in. Any person who is on employment or permanent role of the contractor, he will be liable to pay him gratuity. See, in fact, in many companies I've seen, on a monthly basis, they collect gratuity. Gratuity is paid on a 5-year basis. No, it is not paid on a monthly basis. But the recovery is done monthly. And if it doesn't pay, it is a breach of the contract. So you must have a good contract, which can deal with all these issues. The liability of contractor to pay the gratuity dues, it should be clearly mentioned.
Mr. Krishnamurthy, if can I add on to what you are saying?
Yes, please.
Because for this gratuity and bonus, the agreement that a company has with a contractor, the contractor is already taking these monies from the company, but he is supposed to pay the workmen. So actually the money is coming from the principal contract employer through the contractor. And as Mr. Krishnamurthy says, some of us pay to him on a monthly basis, whether it is gratuity, bonus, or even leave encashment, or some of us make it as an yearly payment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Sneha ma'am, can we give some more focus on this point? In fact, for the gratuity and the leave, what we are giving with the contract every month. Can we go more detail about it? We need some more clarity on that. Sir, Krishna sir.
I didn't follow your question. Can you repeat it, please?
Sir, the topic which we are discussing about the gratuity and the leave.
Yeah, gratuity is something which is payable once a person completes, 5 years. Now, 5 years continuous service is not necessarily 5 calendar years of service. The Madras High Court has held that if a person works for 4 years and 10 months, 10 months would be 300 days. If he has worked for 240 days, he would have completed 5 completed years of service, and therefore gratuity would be payable. A person may have worked for 7 years, and in the 7 years, he has got only 4 years where he has worked for 240 days. He has not completed 5 completed years of service. He may have worked for 7 years, but he has not completed 5 continuous years of service. He will not be eligible for gratuity. But he worked for 7 years. He has to work for 5 continuous years of service. He must put 240 days of work, and he must have 5 years like that. Then only he is eligible for that. Some companies which work for less than 6 days a week, they need to have 190 days. So suppose I'm having 5-day working, then the cutoff point becomes 190 days. Then if I work for 190 days, I will be eligible for 1 year of completed service. And that completed days of working means I have to work The Sundays are not included. Paid holidays may be included, but Sundays and weekly offs are not included in that period. So I have to work for 240 days, then I have to work for 5 years like that, then only I'll be eligible for gratuity unless I die, So if I have completed 3 years of service and I die, then I will get gratuity. So that gratuity cannot be barred. And that's a right. He must get it from his principal and from his employer. And you have a contract with the contractor, So he indemnifies you from all this and he doesn't, make the payment. And the contract employee says that I have not received the payment. Then you can make the payment and recover that money from him, and you can file a police complaint of cheating also against the contractor, and criminal case can be launched against him. So generally contractors don't want trouble. They don't want to get into police station and all that, because it's a case of cheating, It amounts to cheating. You're paying every month gratuity and he's not paying him, means it's a case of very clear case of cheating. 420 mein wo avandar pakada jayega. So he's also a person who's a businessman. He wants to do business. He's not going to, spend time in the prison. So you must have good contracts, and enforcement of the contract is very important. And, generally where, companies are strict in these areas, the people who are doing the shortcuts and all that, they will not come to such companies because they know that, the compliance of the company is very strong. And that's where, the employees also look at, the company A, B or C, So suppose you're going to work like in a company like Larsen & Toubro or Godrej or, ONGC, these are all companies which are reputed companies. They have very clear practices. So the short-term contractor will not go into these companies at all because he will not even be considered by these companies. So please have some good policies, where you monitor and you ensure that compliance is done. You do compliance in terms of fulfilling the principal responsibility law has imposed on you. If a person has worked for 5 years, he has to pay gratuity. Why he cannot pay him? And if he cannot pay him and he doesn't pay him after taking the money from you, he should be blacklisted. He should not be allowed to come into your company again, nor to any other company. In fact, many companies ask, have you worked there? Then they will refer to you. Has he been working here? Then you can say, no, he is working here, but he has been blacklisted. He will never get any contract in any other company. He will come back to you and say, sir, I will comply, sir, please remove me from the blacklist.
Sir, I have one question, sir.
Yes.
Sir, suppose a contract workman is he is fixed with one contractor for even 5 years or more than 5 years, but he is working different organization. 1 year with X, 1 year with Y, 1 year with Z, right?
Whatever.
So principal employer will not pay the gratuity because he is engaging only for 1 year, right? And can he deduct from his minimum wages that gratuity part so that he can pay after 5 years?
No, he cannot. Gratuity is the liability of the employer. Followed. So the contractor is working with an employer. That employer has employed him for 5 years. Then it becomes mandatory on his part to pay him gratuity.
So that means the whatever the minimum wage he is paying, suppose, and over and above he has to pay the gratuity. So whenever he is working with any principal employer, he has to take this consideration that whenever he is working, he should consider that cost into that, right?
No, but this is what contractors do, na? Contractors, I don't know whether you have had experience of working with contractors. They will charge you. They will charge you for gratuity. They will charge you for leave.
Yeah, leave, bonus, everything. But suppose
he doesn't pay, then what? Suppose ये सब charge करता है, तुमने दिया उसको और वो भरता नहीं उसको, then that's cheating, no?
No, sir. I am giving one question here. Suppose if I am a principal employer and I am engaging contractor only for 1 year, and I deny to pay them, कि I am not responsible for the gratuity, but still he come with us ki quotation that 7% or 10% is my service charge, or that is my leave for 240 days or whatever days the leave I have to pay this leave days and bonus, right?
Correct.
For the year. And but principal employer deny for the gratuity. It is on contractor to agree on that condition. Otherwise, he has to ask that I will be retaining this contract worker for 5 years with me and 1 year for you. But since it is for 5 years for me, so I need to charge from you, right?
Right? Your point of view is very valid, that you as a principal employer can say, I will not pay gratuity because you have worked only for 1 year.
Yeah.
But the point that you are saying that I will return that 1 year's amount that is there and pay him to him at the end of 5 years is impracticable, because you are not his principal employer. You are not liable to pay gratuity. You are not liable to pay bonus also. That
Yes.
is the responsibility of the contractor only. So why are you taking additional headaches? You have enough headaches, no? You are doing a business. You are having enough headaches. You want more headaches or what?
No, I'm just understanding.
His headaches don't take. No, why you want to take his headaches? Don't take headaches for the contract worker. That is also his.
For such
You have to
tenure,
take
we cannot be held responsible for the
You are not
gratuity or
responsible for that. That's the law.
Yeah.
Gratuity, you are not liable for the contractor's liability.
Thank you, sir. That was only my question.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. One of our participants, Vineet Rana, sir, has one question. Can bonus paid along with monthly wages to contract worker?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question you have raised. Bonus is not paid on a monthly basis, but Bonus Act envisages what is called advance bonus. You can give an advance of bonus and adjust it against the salary. That is only for your employees. A contractor employee is not your employee. Followed? So you don't pay bonus to him. And sometimes, in many companies it varies. For example, company may have a situation where it pays bonus of 20% plus ex gratia. So all the good companies pay not minimum bonus, 20% plus ex gratia. But contractor is a small man. He is not a big man. So if you ask him to pay 20% bonus, he'll say, "Mera paas paisa nahi, aap do, hum dega." So some companies pay that money. Okay, so they want the contract labor also to be happy and not create problems. So they tell the contractor, you pay 20% bonus or also additionally ex gratia and we'll reimburse you. So that's okay. Now, if they pay on a monthly basis, that is also perfectly all right, but they must pay it as a monthly advance. It must be shown as an advance. So on an advance, PF is not payable. On an advance, ESI is not payable. But you pay it as a fixed amount every month. Bonus करके खाली बोलेंगे ना, तो they will say that ESI and PF will say, इसके ऊपर भी तुम PF दो, because it's a fixed payment on a regular basis you are making on every month. Whereas if you make it an advance, you are giving an advance, that is not wages. It is against something, and it's against annual liability. So pay it as an advance. Don't pay it as bonus. I hope you understood this difference.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So one more question from Shri Sachin Kumar, sir. Fixed term employment is for temporary work. How can we hire worker for permanent job? If job is permanent, we cannot employ fixed term employee. If we terminate, we lose skilled employee. What is your opinion on this, sir?
Yeah, you have touched upon a very raw nerve. Fixed term employment should not become variable employment. So I always tell a company, if a person is taken on fixed term at the end of 1 year, terminate him. But he's good employee, then take him for a 2-year contract. From a 1-year contract, you take him for a 2-year contract on different terms and conditions of service. He will be very happy. If I work with you for 1 year and you're giving me a 2-year contract, I'll be very happy with that. A person who has completed a 2-year contract, give him a 3-year contract and different terms. First year, this much you will get. Second year, this much you will get. Third year, you will get this much. More than what he's getting currently. He will accept it. So you can give 1-year contract, 2-year contract, 3-year contract, 5-year contract. And at the end of this period, is still working as a contract employee, then consider him permanency. Yeah? I mean, you can't keep a person, continuously on fixed term contract for more than 8 years, just like this. So, I think, we also need to introspect on the type of practices we are following and whether we are being fair to our employees. I think it's very important. This unionization, strikes, agitations, all take place because we become unfair. So do a little bit of fair play. They're not asking for the sky. A little bit, person who is a good worker, I think you should really look into it. He's worked for you for 8 years, 3-4 contracts he has had, and at the end of it, you still can't make up your mind. Then it's something which is a very sorry state of affairs, which is reflecting about you, not the contract labor.
Sir, regarding this bonus, My question, sir, Vinit Rana here, sir.
Yes, please, bolo.
Sir, this bonus you have answered me that you pay as an advance, sir. But sir, we can some of the practice has been going at 8.33% on the basic. Generally, we pay in the salary, and we say that is the annual bonus been paid you monthly basis. I think it is correct in the law of in the this in the view of law, labor law.
Bonus Act itself has provided for this advance bonus.
Okay. So we have to put up as an advance bonus, monthly advance bonus. We can give.
Yes,
Sir, we can give.
pay, yes, yeah. In anticipation of what. See, instead of paying in one shot, at the end of the time, you can pay on a regular basis.
Yeah, monthly basis.
That is provided in the Bonus Act.
Okay, sir. Only thing heading to be changed as a advance bonus.
Yeah, make it very clear that this is an advance bonus.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Participants, this will be the last question for the session. The question is, how can we deduct PF, only minimum wages or total wages, if we pay more than minimum wages?
PF has to be on the wages paid. And there is a judgment of the Supreme Court in Vidya Mandir, which says that any money which is paid ordinarily, necessarily, universally, then that amount is considered to be a basic wage and you have to pay PF contribution on that. So this controversy now, question of paying on minimum wage doesn't arise. It is on the total wages. If you're paying on a regular basis, some amounts, they would also be includable for PF contribution.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, please continue. Sorry, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir, for answering the questions very patiently. Now it's time to acknowledge all those who have contributed to the event, and to propose vote of thanks, I invite Dr. Neena Jhala, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Indeed, this evening has been an enlightening one, I believe, for all of us, with two reasons. One, we have Dr. Krishnamurthy sir's experience of working in the industrial relations sector. Another, we have Dr. Nija madam's personal interventional experiences to share with. And I believe this has definitely aided all of us in the segment of contract labor and the act thereof. On behalf of Nirmal Shah sir, on behalf of Shri VC Shah Patel Services and behalf of Shri Tirupati Placement Agency, and on behalf of Anand Institute of Social Work, as well as on behalf of all the participants here, I am extremely thankful to Krishnamurthy sir as well as Nija ma'am for being with us and sharing their deep insights on the law in question. I must not forget to thank Nirmal Shah sir for his contribution on conceptualizing this entire effort. And as sir had rightly said in the beginning, that this is our third attempt, and we hope to continue the same in the future even. With the august presence here of several senior members of the HR fraternity, I must acknowledge the presence of Shri Bhaskar Joshi sir, who has been guiding us through the entire session as well as our own learnings. So on behalf of every one of us, I am thankful to both the experts. I am thankful to the organizers and to all of you for sharing your valuable 1.5 hours time. And we look forward to your participation even in the upcoming certification of labor laws sessions in the near future. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, one and all. We look forward to welcoming you again. And with this, I formally declare this webinar closed. Thank you, one and all.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks, Bhaskar ji.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Krishnamurthy sir ji.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
GNFC Jindabad.
Thank you very much, sir. Narendra bhai, thank you.
So nice of you. Nirmal
My
bhai,
pleasure.
great value addition to the entire fraternity, the professionals and the people who are having lots of questions. And Dr. Krishnamurthy is the authority on this because he has done lots of work in the entire span of his career. So we are blessed with his
Thank
presence
you very
and
much, sir.
very good
Thank you very
knowledge.
much for giving me this chance and
So
opportunity. Thank you.
Nirmal Sarji, I mean, a great work, a great contribution to the entire industrial people.
Thank you, sir.
I really proud of you.
Thank you, sir. I'm leaving, sir. Thank
Yes.
you.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bhaskar ji is a right person to connect all.
Thank you, sir.
Dada, excellent. You have always been known for this.
Yes.
And you are a resourceful person to bring such authority for the benefit of lots of people over here. So I really congratulate you and Nirmal sir. You are two persons who are actually working on this and people are benefiting. It's quite huge. And all organizations who are participated through their HR or their people. And contractors are really getting lots of clarity through this kind of an activity. So salutes to both of you.
Thank you, sir.
Well done.
Hello, Bhaskar bhai.
Nirja madam listening first time, but good work being done by that organizations. Right.
Thank you, Bhaskar
Thank you all.
bhai. Hello.
Ah.